This is Ringler Radio, where you get all the latest news and information about settlement solutions, litigation, mediation, and structured financial security from Ringler, the largest and most experienced company of settlement consultants in the United States. Ringler has been helping injured people and their families since 1975. Ringler Radio is made possible in part by American General, Liberty Mutual, MetLife, Mutual of Omaha, New York Life, Pacific Life, and Prudential. Now join Ringler Radio host Larry Cohen.
Well, hello and welcome to Ringler Radio, everyone. I'm Larry Cohen, head of Ringler's Northeast Operations, and we're certainly glad you could join us again today. Well, here on Ringler Radio, we've previously covered the growing trend toward litigation surrounding traumatic brain injuries and concussions, many of them in the sports arena. But recently, since more is being done to understand and prevent these injuries in youth sports, we brought in an expert whose work at the Center on Brain Injury Research and Training, also known as CBIRT, at the University of Oregon, is making a big difference. And joining me today as my co-host is my friend and Ringler colleague, Nolan Robinson, from our Beaverton, Oregon office. So with that, Nolan, hi, how are you? Good to have you as my co-host.
Hi, Larry. Great to be back.
Terrific. Well, our guest today is David Kracke, the Brain Injury Advocate Coordinator for the Center on Brain Injury Research and Training. David is a returning guest on Ringler, and now his advocacy work on this issue is having some real impact. So welcome back to the show, David. Great to have you back.
Larry, thank you so much. And Nolan, thank you as well. I was reminiscing back to October of 2011 when we did a similar interview to this back in what I'll call the good old days. You guys really helped launch my advocacy with that interview. It's been ongoing since that time. As you both know, there's been such an incredible increase in public awareness about youth concussions, and I want to thank you guys for being a part of that.
Well, I want to thank you. We've launched the careers of so many people on this show. It's been terrific. It really has. Well, David, there's no cure for traumatic brain injuries, so your approach is to try and intervene at the youth and school athletic level. Talk about what you and CBIRT are doing to really help that process.
Well, it really started back in 2009 when Oregon enacted the nation's first youth concussion law. We were working basically in tandem with the state of Washington at that point, both states developing youth concussion protocols. The University of Oregon and the Center on Brain Injury Research and Training really were they're one and the same, and they were really a leading educational research component for all of this. University of Oregon had a real commitment to understanding the effects of traumatic brain injury with youth players, and it really just kind of spawned an opportunity to essentially put our money where our mouth was. And when CBIRT, University of Oregon, asked me to join their team, this was pursuant to a federal activities of community living grant, ACL grant, to be the brain injury advocate coordinator. I couldn't resist. It was the perfect opportunity.
I can understand, and that's quite a process you're taking on here, a fight, which is a great fight to be involved in, and obviously there's a lot of work to do, but you're certainly in the right spot.
David, you talked about Max's Law and Jenna's Law a little bit there, and I know Max's Law was 2009. Jenna's Law was that 2013?
14 is when it was went into effect. We were working on it from basically 2012, 2013.
Gotcha. So there's been some time has passed now. Are you seeing kind of an impact on how concussions are treated now as a result of those laws?
I would say that both of those laws have been tremendous successes. Now, does that mean that everything is perfect? Absolutely not. But what it does mean is that concussion protocol is now firmly established within both high school athletics and general youth, more recreational athletics throughout the state of Oregon. Under Max's Law, which focuses primarily on high school sports, coach is required to, the 4 R's we call it, he's required or she's required to recognize that a concussion may have occurred, to remove the player from play, whether it's a practice or a game, once that recognition occurs, to refer that player to a qualified healthcare professional, and to allow the player to return only when that qualified healthcare professional has provided a release, a medical release to do so. Now, Jenna's law kind of expanded on that, and it took it to concussion protection and concussion protocols for all youth sports. But inherent in Jenna's law is also this incredible education component. It requires concussion education for all coaches, all referees, at least one parent of the player, and for all players over the age of 12 years. So think about what we have created now. Our conservative estimates are about 150,000 Oregonians out of a population of about 3.8 or so million. 150,000 Oregonians per year are receiving concussion education. One other thing that's really important with regard to Max's law, and then also Zach's law up in Washington, since that time, all 50 states have codified some sort of concussion protocols for young athletes. All 50. Think about that, you guys. Larry, Nolan, last time we talked, probably since a couple of years had passed since Max's, we probably had 10 or so other states that had followed our lead. Now, all 50 states have.
No question. That is fantastic. Yep. That's really fantastic progress. And boy, getting 50 states to agree on anything these days is tough. But this is a real good start.
It's an easy call, isn't it, though?
Yeah.
It's an easy call.
Well, I'm sure one of the challenges, though, David, is athletes themselves like to play. The football players in high school want to go to college, so they want to be on the field. They don't want to be on the sideline. And, there's this bravado that a lot of them have, as you know. So this return to play concept that is now in play in Oregon, talk a little bit more about that. Maybe you can give us an example of a player that gets tackled. What exactly happens in that protocol before they can get back on the field?
Well, sure. And I think before we get into the specifics of the protocol, we need to know the why. Why are we doing this? And the reality is that 99.9999, go on, how many nines do you want to add to it, percent of all youth athletes are going to go pro in something other than sports. And whatever they decide to go pro in, whether it's teaching, engineering, journalism, being a lawyer, a doctor, whatever it might be, guaranteed they're going to need as much cognitive brain function as possible. So under Max's law, the return to play protocols, and they're the same under Jenna's law, and quite frankly, they're the same in almost all states. The law states that if a player suffers a blow to the head or body and has signs, symptoms, or behaviors consistent with a concussion, then the coach must employ the 4 R's that we just talked about. And the unfortunate truth is that we can see those specific examples pretty much any high school athletic event if you're there at the wrong time when a player is concussed. But I'll actually do that. I'll actually go to high school football games just to kind of see how things are happening. And I went to one last season, and a player certainly was hit hard. I mean, there it was, hit hard. He kind of got up from this hard hit. I could tell from the stands that he was having some balance problems, kind of stumbling around, looked a little stunned, looked a little confused.
And those are kind of obvious issues you could see. I mean, but what about the less obvious? Are the officials that are on the field, are they charged with any observation issues and trying to control this as well? Or is it just simply the coaching staff from the sideline has to kind of make an observation on their own right?
That's a really, really great question, and I talk about this a lot. The coach is not required to have seen the hit to the player. The coach is not required to observe those concussion signs or symptoms. Anyone can do that. But once the coach learns of that, whether it be from a referee, from another player, from a spectator even, then the coach's responsibility of the coach's protocol kicks in. So no, we don't have there's no requirement that the coach sees it. As long as someone sees it and reports it to the coach, then those protocols kick in. So hopefully the referees are well aware of this at this point, and if they see something, it comes to light. But back to this game that I went to, the coach, in fact, did recognize it. The player was pulled out immediately. So now you have recognition, now you have removal. And then I watched as the athletic trainer, and luckily there's athletic trainers at many of these games now, the athletic trainer went through what we call the impact testing. And impact testing is a baseline. They do the impact testing preseason, establish a neurologic baseline for that player that allows them to then do the impact testing once a concussion is suspected and see if there's any deviation from that baseline that the player had at the onset. And in this case, there apparently was some sort of deviation from baseline. The athletic trainer sat the player down. Ultimately, the player walked off the field and went to the locker room, came back in street clothes, and sat out the rest of the game and cheered on his team. Team members were showing great camaraderie. It was Max's Law in practice. It was really great to see.
David, can we talk a little bit about flag football versus tackle football for youth? I mean, I've been seeing commercials on TV here for a new flag football league, but at the same time, when I drive by the high school on Saturday morning, I still see kids of all ages out there playing tackle football. And I mean, do you have some thoughts about what they should be doing at that age, at those younger ages in particular?
I do. This is a real big kind of question that's happening right now in youth football. Studies were published in the fall of 2017 and then again in spring of 2018 that demonstrates neurological damage or neuropsychological onset, executive function problems, increased odds for impairment in the future, where what they call the age of first exposure, AFE, to tackle football is under the age of 12. That the young brain, male brain especially, is really developing in that pre-adolescence stage that it's in, and it's very easily damaged. And so when these kids are getting out there and hitting themselves head to head over and over and over, we have and are seeing, thanks to these great doctors, actual scientific basis for confirming that they are suffering some form of cognitive impairment as a result. Now, is it going to happen in every case? No. But where it does happen, it's going to be significant. In the spring 2018 study, they showed a 13-year earlier onset of chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, the NFL disease, in those players who played youth football before the age of 12. This is a very serious thing. So what do we do? Parents are educated at this point. If I'm a parent of a kid who's playing football and I'm aware of this science, I'm going to say, what's happening? What's happening now that I'm educated about this? And what I'm doing as a parent is I'm demanding options. So one of those options is no full contact football before the age of 14. I know you guys are considering that in Massachusetts right now as a legislative option.
Yeah, 7th grade. Yeah,
that's right. But on the flip side of that coin is football is absolutely entrenched in our society.
Let me just say this, David. That issue you just raised about football being entrenched is really at the cusp of everything we're talking about here, because there'd be no argument about what you're talking about the medical science if it wasn't for the entrenchment of football as part of our culture and our society. So let's take a quick break right now, and we'll come back in just a minute with some more interesting information about concussions and youth football right here on Ringler Radio. We'll be right back.
This is Ringler Radio, brought to you from Ringler, the nation's leading provider of fair settlement solutions. Did you know that Ringler is involved in a third of all structured settlement cases in the country? Ringler advisors work with all the parties in a lawsuit settlement to find the best possible financial solution for the people involved. Everybody wins. There's a Ringler consultant in all the major cities of the U.S. No one has more experienced experts in the settlement business than Ringler. Check out our website at www.ringlerassociates.com for the best information for injured parties, attorneys, and claims professionals to find the Ringler advisor nearest you. When it's your interests at stake in a lawsuit settlement, you want only the best, most objective financial plan. You can count on Ringler advisors to create a customized plan that meets the financial needs of you and your family for the future. Visit ringlerassociates.com to learn more.
Welcome back to Ringler Radio. I'm your host, Larry Cohen, and here with my co-host, Nolan Robinson, we're speaking with our special guest, David Kracke, the Brain Injury Advocate Coordinator for the Center on Brain Injury Research and Training in Oregon. Nolan, I know you and I were talking before the show about a lot of the technology. You've seen it out there in Oregon and other places. Tell us about that, Nolan.
Yeah, this is interesting. I've been fascinated when I've seen stories about people who are looking ways to innovate and improve this kind of situation. I know there's the Dartmouth football. Their coach, Buddy Tevens, has created the mobile virtual player tackling dummy. Is this the model for the future to protect football players, do you think, David?
I think there are a couple of things happening with Coach Tevens and the mobile virtual player, as well as what's going on with helmet design. Company out of Seattle called Vicis, VICIS, that's essentially created a helmet that has a kind of a crumple zone to it, much like a vehicle's crumple zone. A lot of the Seahawks are wearing that helmet, as are others. But what Coach Tevens at Dartmouth stated a few years back was that no Dartmouth player will ever tackle another Dartmouth player in practice. They worked with folks at their engineering school to create this mobile virtual player. It's essentially a tackling robot. And it's all because Coach Tevens understands the risk of concussions, and he understands that practices are where most concussions occur. And so he's greatly reduced that risk. So, yeah, I think what he is doing, what companies like Vicis are doing with the crumple zone on the helmet, really are taking us into the future and really kind of show us where we're going.
Yeah, I've seen those Vicis helmets. They look pretty advanced. Although you notice that even with some of the newer helmets, some of the players like to wear the old helmets. I mean, it's kind of funny. It reminds me of back in hockey when they went to helmets. There was still some players who wanted to go bareheaded, in the face of all those pucks. So there's no accounting for taste in some of those instances.
I've heard from some of those players, and it's in some ways it's the peripheral vision. So it can be something as kind of basic as that, where they want that vision as opposed to that helmet protection.
Well, let's end the show here, David, with this issue, and that is players can get concussed, but then another concussion takes place. In other words, they can go through all the protocols, be taken out of the game, come back into the game when they're perfectly ready, and then get another concussion. What is the impact of the second concussion, the syndromes that I know are out there about multiple concussions? What is that all about?
Well, what you're talking about is second impact syndrome. Second impact syndrome is a situation where when a player is concussed, and again, I'm going to revert back to my layperson speak here, get out of the medical. I consider it when those brain cells are concussed, they turn into icicles. They of course don't really turn into icicles, but let's use that for the analogy. If you let that player's brain heal, it's as if those icicles slowly melt, they drip to a stream, out to a little creek, to a river, to the ocean, and everything for the most part is good. If, however, that player is concussed while those brain cells are still in this icicle form, it's like taking a stick to the eaves and those brain cells shatter. And at that point, you have permanent neurocognitive injury.
No question. So, you're doing a lot of fantastic work, David. And there are a lot of, as we said, technological advances and even legislative advances that are really helping in this whole arena. But overall, would you say you're optimistic about where this is going, or are you a little more careful about that?
I am really optimistic. I really think that the message is now out there. I think people are responding to it. I mean, you are seeing a drop in participation in youth football. I don't think that's necessarily a good thing, because we want our kids out there playing sports, but it is a good thing in that parents are saying, well, I want my kid to play sports. I don't want them to potentially injure their brains while they're doing it. Hopefully this will lead to some awareness among these more entrenched personalities who will say, now I get it. I should, support the league's decision to do what they can to make sure that my kid cognitively is intact at the end of the day. The fact that all 50 states have passed analogous laws the fact that there's so much talk about it, the fact that we have so many brilliant researchers doing this work, all leads in my mind to a future that is brighter than where we were, especially in the 1990s and the 2000s.
Well, that's a great way to end the show, and we look forward to hearing from you again in a little while to see a little update on how things are going. And if someone wanted to contact you, David, how would they do that?
Well, they can contact me right through the Center on Brain Injury Research and Training. Phone number out there is area code 541-346-0593, or they can contact me via email, and it's first initial D. My last name is Kracke, Kracke. So it's D Kracke at CBIRT. That's CBIRT.org. And I would encourage anyone who has any questions or wants to chat to shoot me a call or shoot me an email.
Terrific. And Nolan, if someone wanted to talk to you about structuring settlements, how would they do that?
I can be reached, of course, via our website, ringlerassociates.com, or by our phone number, 503-601-8100, or our email address, nrobinson@ringlerassociates.com.
Well, that's great. And as Nolan said, you can reach any Ringler Associate on ringlerassociates.com. It's a great website. It's got a lot of great information. You can also find us on ringlerradio.com and LegalTalkNetwork.com, or you can go to iTunes, where you can download any of our shows and listen to them at your leisure. So with that, I want to thank you, David, for being a great guest.
Thank you, Larry. Really appreciate it. And thank you, Nolan.
And thank you, Nolan, for being a great co-host. And for the rest of you out there, go have a great day. Bye-bye.
The views expressed by the participants of this program are their own and do not represent the views of, nor are they endorsed by, Legal Talk Network, its officers, directors, employees, agents, representatives, shareholders, and subsidiaries. None of the content should be considered legal advice. As always, consult a lawyer. Thanks for listening to Ringler Radio, celebrating more than a decade of podcasting and over 2 million listeners. Think of Ringler, the objective settlement advisors with more than 140 consultants in 60 cities nationwide. Visit ringlerassociates.com today.